Welcome to Framework. I am John, one of the hosts of Framework, and with me, as always, is Al, the other host of Framework. How are you today, Al?
Oh, I'm good, John. I feel like I'm finally making some peace with the tragic murder of my parents when I was young.
Good. I don't know how to respond to that. It sounds so serious. Joining us, first-time guest, Alex Fletcher. Welcome to Framework. Thank you for coming in.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I've been meaning to for a while, and this felt like the appropriate thing to do, because today we are talking about the future of DC on film and television. The upcoming slate of DC-related projects being ushered in by James Gunn as we sort of all witness the ignominious defeat and end of the Zack Snyder DC-verse.
Good riddance.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Good.
Sorry.
Good take right off.
They're early.
Yeah.
I would say good riddance as well, but isn't it sort of being respun as actually the Snyder Cut is a grand vindication of his vision?
That's how it's being spun, for sure, yes. A lot of people feel that way. A kind of weird, loudly upset contingent of DC fandom who has no interest in a new direction or James Gunn and is already opposed to this new thing before it even really gets started. So also coming into, after, 15 years of Marvel movies kind of dominating culture, as they push into sort of a superhero fatigue place as well, with all the multiverses and Kang dynasties and such that are going on there, and sort of the wreckage of the existing DC cinematic universe, as we watch Shazam sequel kind of crash and burn with regards to critical reception and box office. It's just sort of a chaotic time, and Warner Brothers, under new management, has decided it's time for a brand new version of all of this stuff that will be coming soon, sort of concurrently with some of the existing branches of the older stuff that was successful. Such as the Robert Pattinson Batman or the Joaquin Phoenix Joker verses, which are, of course, separate but equal Batman franchises that will be ongoing within the new DC slate. Gentlemen, what the hell's going on here? How's this going to work?
As you said, they just wiped the slate. They just shook the Etch-a-Sketch, and it's still already so complicated and trifurcated just with Batman.
Yeah.
Where are we?
There will be 3 Batmans kind of ongoing, assuming Jokerverse has a Batman or Batman stand-in. Maybe
are you including the Batman in Titans, the TV show?
No.
I think that's over. I think
that's
that
4.
is over. I'm not entirely sure. Or maybe it's Elseworlds, which is sort of the...
Well, it'll definitely be Elseworlds.
Yeah. Oh, God.
And there's also a Batman, the Harley Quinn cartoon show, right? But maybe that's canceled too. I don't know. I can't keep track of this stuff.
Unclear.
I mean, there's 3 to 5 Batmen, but these are Bruce Wayne Batmen too. Like, we're not talking about, there's a Nightwing that took over in one section, and there's a Damian Wayne running around, or there's a Batman Beyond.
They'll have all that, though.
There are at least 3 primetime Bruce Waynes running around separately at the same time. Mm-hmm. Plus Michael Keaton.
So this gets to, as I was doing research to come on the podcast, and about Superman and about whatever, I was looking up let's talk about what Superman TV shows there were and movies there were, and looking stuff up, what had occurred to me is since 1977, there have been a grand total of 8 years where there was not a Superman on TV or in a film. And if you talk about superhero fatigue, I wonder if this is the major problem. Are people too flooded with Superman from the last literally 50 years of some Superman on TV or movies somewhere? Lois and Clark, Smallville, Super Friends, the Supergirl TV show. There was a Superboy TV show in the late 80s. Hasn't been a time when Superman hasn't been present in popular culture, and how can you possibly tell a new version of the story when it's been this present?
I would say my instinct is the bigger issue than the Superboy TV show of the 80s is just the glut of things in the last 10 years, especially. That it's not Superman specifically so much as there's been a new superhero movie or show out every month of the last, I don't know, 150 months. And yeah, not all of them are Superman or Supergirl or like Superman directly related, but all superheroes almost have some Superman in their DNA.
Well, he's sort of the first and most important one. Right? That's why we keep coming back to him. He's sort of the maximal idea of the superhero. What powers does he have? All of them. He has all the powers. He's got the he's sort of the most basic first superhero that you kind of discover as a kid. I think it's certainly the first one I discovered as a kid. Because it's sort of an elemental, like platonic ideal of the superhero. What's his deal? Well, he's really good. He saves people and fights for truth, justice, the American way. I mean, you poke at it a little more, and there's some it's a bit of an immigrant story. There is some nuance and interesting wrinkles to it, but ultimately, this is the first and most direct superhero that you kind of understand as a kid. Probably, he can fly. That's cool. He's unbeatable in a fight. I think it really comes down to the powers that he can kind of just do anything super.
But so it feels a little bigger to me even than that. So, I mean, I've traveled a bunch, and I have made it a point to always have a Superman t-shirt in my rotation ever since I was a teenager or whatever. And when I travel, anywhere I travel, and I wear a Superman t-shirt, someone says to me, "Hey, Superman." It is universal. No matter what country I've been in, wearing a Superman t-shirt, no matter what language that person speaks, they are able to say to me, "Hey, Superman." There is something bigger about Superman than even Batman or any of the other superheroes that I think makes it a challenge to do a good movie, because it is embedded in maybe everybody on the planet. That's a little bit ambitious, but like a lot of the population of the planet.
I mean, is it a branding thing almost? It's almost like Mickey Mouse, He's such a familiar face and such a representative icon for a kind of a whole thing, a whole corporate identity, that it's hard to tell a Mickey Mouse story. Like it's too many things, it's too much baggage, and I mean, I don't know, not enough personality on its own. Is that harsh?
In terms of iconography, though, also, it is Superman's iconography is super clear. It's primary colors, and it's easier to pull off than even like Batman or Spider-Man, which I would guess are the next two biggest heroes in terms of global penetration. But really, if you can fashion together a blue shirt and a red cape, which is just any sort of red blanket you've tied around your neck, you've got enough Superman to be identifiable. And I think maybe like since the Burton movie in '89, the bat symbol has become a little like more easily recognizable, like broadly recognizable as sort of black bat on yellow background or whatever. But it's still the Superman S symbol had a 50-year head start at a minimum.
It's not an S
on that. Right. Yeah, it stands for hope.
Point of order. Sorry.
Right. Well, it's a dialectic thing. There's different translations. Some people say it stands for hope. Some people say it stands for fuck around and find out. Zack Snyder went one way, and James Gunn, I think, is going another.
Okay. So yeah, that is ostensibly what we're here to talk about. Like what these new movies are going to be. What this whole thing is. Whether it's a good idea, a workable idea. Is this something that has legs? So I'm just going to read out the new DC slate here, which is so ambitious and so large, and just like we'll circle around all the Superman stuff, I'm sure. This is, of course, after we get rid of our current slate of DC properties that represent the old guard on the way out. That is The Flash, Blue Beetle, which no one knows anything about, and Aquaman, The Lost City or The Lost Kingdom. I'm not sure what that is, but they're all due out this year. So that's just sort of, playing out what's already been made. There's rumors that the Flash movie is very good. We'll see.
Sorry, does the Blue Beetle have like cast from the existing DC universe?
Who knows? No one knows anything about that movie at this point. There's one poster.
At a glance, it doesn't look like it.
It is technically part of that continuity, Although what that means anymore is anyone's guess. As I understand, the Flash is going to reset it, and so much like the multiverse in Marvel, everything was going to be allowed within one umbrella, Elseworlds version of a thing.
If they're going to reset the universe and then have 3 more movies after it, I wonder how much of a reset it's actually going to be.
Well, who knows? Who knows? I mean, we'll have a new Superman. I know that. We'll have a new Batman. We'll have new versions of all these characters that exist alongside the old versions that are still going to exist. Well, I guess not all of them.
There's been no indication that we're going to get a new Wonder Woman, though, right?
No, I think that's done.
I saw her in the last TV spots for Shazam 2, even.
And that's probably the last you'll see of the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman. Probably.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
I think so. Unless she's in the Flash. Who knows? What I do know is Robert Pattinson goes on, as does the Colin Farrell version of the Penguin. We'll have an HBO show at some point this year.
But are they in their own silo, or are they going to be crossing over with the Flash and Wonder Woman? Because it's hard for me to envision Robert Pattinson fucking around with Hawkman and the Martian Manhunter.
Well, great question. But
as of now, I don't think so. They're in their own Elseworlds. They're in their own Elseworlds universe that is going to be self-contained to that Batman.
So that's not a like cinematic universe then. That's just these are just superhero movies like we did in the 90s, right?
Yes, except there will also be a cinematic universe happening at the same time with its own Batman. And at this point, it's pretty old hat to just open a portal and be like, "Oh, now Robert Pattinson Batman is here." That wouldn't be a surprise. Or, and I believe his Joker is different than Joaquin Phoenix Joker. I think. Okay, this is so goddamn confusing already. And that's before we even start talking about the James Gunn announced projects, of which there are, let's see here, 12. There are 12. I believe starting in 24 with a couple television shows, something called Creature Commandos, which is a cartoon, and Waller, sort of a bridge series that leads to Peacemaker Season 2, starring Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. Then we have the Superman legacy film directed by James Gunn. This is the Superman reboot. We have Lanterns, a prestige television show in the style of True Detective about the Green Lantern Corps. Okay.
I'm sorry. Where are you reading this from?
This is as announced. This is Hollywood Reporter. James Gunn had he's given a small description of each of these things, and cited True Detective directly.
True Detective.
Yes.
Does that just mean that, like, there'll be, as there's a new True Detective every season, there'll be a different Lantern they focus on every season?
No. I believe it's going to be like a pair. It's probably going to be like the first True Detective with a sort of a buddy cop premise of a sort of a season-long mystery involving 2 Green Lanterns we're familiar with. I imagine it would be Hal Jordan.
Hal Jordan and John Stewart.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I heard, something I read.
You think we're actually going to get a woman in a refrigerator?
No, I think they will not.
So, in Green Lantern 51 or 52 that came out around 1996, after they killed off Hal Jordan and brought in a new Green Lantern, Kyle Rayner, which is when I started. That's my favorite Green Lantern, and no one else really cares about him. That his superhero story starts with he finds this ring, and then this villain comes looking for Green Lantern and basically murders his girlfriend and shoves her in a refrigerator. So that's where his story started, so you never know.
I mean, that seems like a True Detective storyline, and honestly...
Sounds very True Detective, yes.
And now it's become, it's the basis of this trope that, is cited derogatorily, obviously, as a bad thing, but is James Gunn actually cheeky enough to throw it in there somewhere on on the edge of this frame? I don't know.
James Gunn is. I mean, he would do that, I would feel like, as a joke, and that's sort of maybe an odd move to do at the beginning of this new Phase 1 Gods and Monsters of the DC slate. And that's just the start, by the way. That's only the first 4. That's probably what we're looking at in 2025 alone. I don't know, maybe Creature Commandos comes out in 24. Then we've got The Authority, which is a movie apparently within the continuity of the larger DC verse about a group of superheroes, not the ones we know really well, that decide to take the law into their own hands and form a perfect society, sort of Justice Lords narrative.
I mean, the Authority started after the Watchmen came out, right? And the Watchmen was very much its own thing in a whole separate universe. And I think it inspired this superhero team as things got into the late 90s and things started to get grayer again. All right, they created the Authority, which is like The Boys or, like the Umbrella Academy or whatever. And they're just not necessarily the nicest, best people, but a superhero team like the Justice League who are saving the day, but they're just doing not necessarily the right or good thing to get it done.
I can see how, 15 years ago, that would be a pretty exciting premise for a movie, and now I'm just like, we've had 5 versions of that, something like that?
Yeah. You just mentioned a couple of them offhand that have been running for years.
But it feels like, based on the way in James Gunn's announcement, he was like, you saw his eyes light up, right? You can see that this is he wants to take the Justice League and Peacemaker and put them together and make a show where he can have irreverent things happen, but within the Justice League where they're, in situations or doing things that you can't have Superman and Wonder Woman do. And so it feels like that's a thing that he is so passionate about. But when I heard it, I'm like, why are we doing that story again?
Yeah, that sounds James Gunnian. It sounds like something I don't think we need right now.
Yeah, but that was also my exact response to there being a Peacemaker show, and that turned out pretty good, actually.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So, I mean, it sounds horrible to me. Granted, I'm a DC skeptic from the start. I grew up as a Marvel kid all the way through, so my knowledge of DC Comics doesn't really extend past Batman. And then I have found the whole Snyderverse to just be misbegotten and just a rough hang from the start.
Woeful, yes. Mm-hmm.
So when you say that, it was an attempt to do Watchmen in the greater DC continuity in the late 90s, so just see like a PG-13 version of Watchmen with 90s extreme Mountain Dew style on it, just sounds like the worst.
It wasn't quite
crap
that
ever,
because it wasn't DC Comics. It was Wildstorm Comics, Comics, which was an offshoot of DC that was, I think, started by Jim Lee, who at the time was one of there were some bad boy rebels of comics in the late 90s, and Jim Lee was one of them. he is now the editor-in-chief of DC Comics, I think. And
so, sort of a James Gunn story, actually.
So he was, this was subversive, and it was popular, and it was cutting edge at the time. It was not as you just described. It was actually a thing that was impactful at the time. My concern is it still impactful now, like John just said?
Well, I mean, what's most interesting to me about that is that this it sounds like an Elseworlds thing. It sounds like, okay, well, we're going to do a different universe with different heroes, and they become fascists. And okay, cool, I get that, but it sounds like this is part of the larger continuity. Like, this is part of the same world as Superman Legacy and the rest of these films coming up, and that I don't understand at all.
Right, they definitively were not in the comic books.
Like, how do you tell that story? Okay, so Superman and Batman are coming into a world that already has sort of a fascist ruling class of superheroes. I mean, maybe that's something. It would be very different from any DC that I'm familiar with, though. Or maybe that's just misinformation, and it is an Elseworlds thing as well. But, I mean, that is kind of the most interesting thing about it to me, so I hope not. But I don't know. I don't know enough about this property to really... I've heard some people say, yeah, it's actually quite good, very James Gunn. So I know. I guess they withhold judgment on that. I know nothing about it, but yeah, it sounds familiar.
Well, the weird thing about this, as we're teasing it out, is going back to what Alex was saying about Superman to start with. I honestly think it's less of an issue of saturation that. For going on 100 years now, we've had some version of Superman kicking around on screens for 80 of the last 90 years or whatever the case is. Then right now it feels like we have had 3 versions of what if superheroes weren't actually good guys and cursed and killed people and were kind of fascist. We've had 3 versions of that kicking around at all times for the past 5 to 10 years. So that seems like a bigger problem with the Authority than the Superman saturation does for Superman Legacy, from where I'm sitting.
Probably, honestly. I mean, I think they need Superman Legacy to be the one that really hits, but I mean, who knows what the larger... It's odd to place the Authority where they have, is the only thing I'm from the outside without really knowing the property. That's what it looks like to me.
But I think to me it makes perfect sense when you talk about what's coming after that. And to me it makes perfect sense based on what they seem to be focusing on in each of their projects.
Okay.
Like the Brave and the Bold.
One other thing that they might be focusing on more that maybe we're missing, part of the bigger picture here, is for as much as they're worried about placing the Authority properly within the greater Wallerverse or whatever version of Superman, they might also just be eyeing when is Thunderbolts coming out from Marvel, which is their kind of anti-hero hero team thing. And
probably the year before that, actually.
Well, that would be the pattern that, as ever, they're going to do Batman vs Superman right after Civil War, and they're going to do Flashpoint right after No Way Home, and and Justice League right after Infinity War, or whatever. It's always
a day late and a dollar short.
They're always
DC.
a day, precisely.
Okay, so moving on with the slate, they got Paradise Lost, which is a Themyscira prequel to Wonder Woman as a television show. They say it's like Game of Thrones. Okay. I guess I can kind of imagine what that would be.
That's
sure.
I can't remember. I mean,
medieval politicking, I think, is what they're going for.
Yeah, but I just can't imagine. Themyscira is way too idealized to be. I mean, I guess it's fine. Whatever. They're trying to evoke an aesthetic more than.
Also, there are other Amazonian colonies or worlds out there. That there's going to be some interplay between Themyscira and these other ones, so it won't just be all internal politics. There will be some other nations involved coming in.
Yeah, I mean the title is provocative a little bit. Paradise Lost is it's an odd, it's quite the title to give to the Wonder Woman prequel because that is a paradise. But I mean I get what that is. I think it'll be PG-13 Game of Thrones with Amazon. Probably some ass kicking, and there's like, oh, I'm bad, and I have a new direction for the Amazons, and I'll fight you for it. I think that sort of thing.
PG-13 Game of Thrones seems to me like an oxymoron. Like, if you're doing a PG-13 version of Game of Thrones, we have other names for that stuff that existed before Game of Thrones did, and the entire thing that evokes is the R-rated version of it. So you're doing Tolkien shit. You're doing Lord of the Rings or whatever. But maybe that's a semantic distinction. About the title, Paradise Lost, one of the best titles ever in all of literature. It's just such an evocative two-word phrase. However, it strikes me as a little bit weird to invoke such explicitly Christian allusions in this very, very, I guess pagan isn't the right word, but
pretty pagan.
Polytheistic Greek mythology environment. It's just, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a very deliberate thing what they're doing with a real intent on muddy some waters. But the English major in me just blinks at that.
Themyscira was originally called Paradise Island, right? And so that's why where that is probably coming from.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think it's probably just not even thinking of that and just taking a popular phrase. but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe there's great purpose to that, but I don't know. This is among the things that I have the least thoughts about of this whole slate, honestly, right now. I think it sounds pre-Wonder Woman narratively, so who can even say? Maybe it'll work. Bleh. Who knows if it even makes it to the air with Warner Brothers the way it is right now. And I guess that's sort of a larger thing I'll get to later. Who knows? Then it's The Brave and the Bold, which introduces the new Batman to the DC slate, which will exist concurrently with Pattinson Batman, but presumably be more family-friendly, while also focusing on Damian Wayne, who is, as I understand it, not the most family-friendly character anyway.
Right.
I don't know. Big question mark here. Brave and the Bold is kind of traditionally sort of a little bit more Golly G. Willikers 1950s style superhero comics.
So I think the way the Brave and the Bold was, in the comics at least, it was an opportunity for DC to bring in their lesser-known superheroes alongside Batman and Robin. So effectively, it was like the Batman and Robin comic book, but then there was like a weekly guest star of like, okay, so the Brave and the Bold was Batman, Robin, plus, okay, this week it's Green Lantern, and then Plastic Man, and then whoever that they want to like highlight in a higher volume comic to try to like, you know, boost sales for the lesser-known heroes. But yes, it was a Silver Age era comic that was lighter. Mm-hmm. However, Damian Wayne is not lighter.
No, he's sort of like Bruce Wayne's actual biological son, and he's a murder crazy kid. Is that right? He
was raised by Talia, who's Ra's al Ghul's
of course
daughter. He was basically Ra's al Ghul's grandson and Bruce Wayne's, you know, Batman's son, raised by the Guild of Assassins or whatever until he was 9 or whatever, and then Batman takes him in as the new Robin.
Is it the League
he's a
of
murderous.
Shadows?
He is a murderous assassin Robin, basically.
I mean, it almost sounds like there's no room for a special guest star Plastic Man in this version of Brave and the Bold. And,
no,
in which case, why call it Brave and the Bold? I'm a big question mark, this one.
So that you don't have to call it. So that you don't have to call it Batman. That is why we call it the Brave and the Bold. So you do not have to have another movie called Batman.
But you are going to have another live-action Batman in it.
Yes, but it is a Batman movie.
Yes, absolutely. It is the Batman. It is the story of Batman and Robin, his son.
And that is going to be the prime DC Universe Batman. That's like replacing Ben Affleck.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Presumably. It's the one that will interact with other characters directly, which Pattinson will not do.
Right. Nor should he.
No. I don't think so. I don't care about Pattinson Batman. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people like that. I don't care.
I don't especially, but he definitely belongs in his own thing. Like the Nolan Batman 2 did not belong interacting with Superman, and that's okay.
Right. But I don't know. I don't know what to expect from this. Bat family stuff, I guess, but it seems weird to me that they're not just doing Dick Grayson, if that's the case, you know? Sort of a lighter Batman who can interact with Batgirl and, I don't know, Batmite. Who all knows? Do they have a dog in there, probably? You know, like, if they're doing the sort of goofy Bat family stuff, Damian Wayne is an odd starting point. I don't really have much else to say at this point other than, like... But
it fits, to me, it fits the... most people have tried to do with DC Comics for the last, 20 years, and James Gunn's style, seemingly, based on the little I know, they're trying to find something edgy. They're trying to find something, a way in that it's like, oh yeah, we got this assassin Robin. Oh yeah, it's Wonder Woman, but there's like infighting, and they're going to be murdering each other on Paradise Island. It's this, but they're authority, so it's just the Justice League, except they're like doing whatever it takes. And so they're trying to create a cinematic universe that is edgy, and the characters don't do quite what you think they're going to do, which is, I guess, better than just the mopey Snyderverse, but still to me misses the mark of what DC Comics and Superman is. But I guess we can get to that.
I do think there has been, like, I don't know, my impression, maybe just my understanding of this has just sort of been that, like, well, I think clearly they're going for a more family-friendly, more, more traditional DC than the Snyderverse, something that is a little closer in tone to the Marvel films, in that it's all ages. You've got your Pattinson and Phoenix sort of Elseworld stuff that you can do, but this is mostly going to be, family-friendly entertainment. And yeah, I think you're right. You look at this a little more in detail, and that's not really the case.
I don't think that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's so more grimdark.
I wouldn't say grimdark. I would say James Gunn, Peacemaker, Suicide Squad dark, which is funny and vibrant and colorful, but like adult.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The big difference, switch up between Snyder to Gunn seems less that it's going to make things more kid-friendly and more that it's going to inject a sense of humor into the proceedings, which was conspicuously absent from the Snyderverse, in my opinion, to its detriment.
I'm okay with that, actually.
And yeah, it's not exactly what I want from superhero movies, except that I liked his Suicide Squad and Peacemaker more than I thought I would. So I guess I got to get... And I mean, Gunn's got a very good track record for me, I guess, overall.
And that was true of Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, who thought Guardians of the Galaxy would become, like, one of the linchpins of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that it has become. Of like everyone loves those movies.
Yeah,
it's because of him.
They're going to be leaning very hard on this new one to carry them for the next few years. I feel like, or at least I hope. Yeah.
But they also let DC, pick their pocket and take the at a time when Marvel was kind of floundering after post Thanos, trying to figure out what the path forward is. Their strongest creative voice, outside of Kevin Feige, obviously, but they let DC take them to poach them to do their stuff for them. I mean, I guess it was between Gunn and Taika Waititi, but after Thor: Love and Thunder, I think Waititi's lost a little bit of luster in a lot of fans' eyes.
I think they were lucky to get him back for Guardians 3 at all, and I think it only happened because he'd already written the script and kind of made the movie in his mind. Like after the brouhaha from, I don't know, 5-6 years ago or whatever, that seems so long ago now.
Yeah.
And the open armed welcome he got from DC, I'm shocked he came back to Marvel at all. So I feel that bridge may have been burnt. Maybe not burnt, but like pretty, like he was ready to go. And I'm glad he got to finish the Guardians trilogy, but but
you can't tell me that Disney and Marvel don't have the resources to rebuild a bridge if they really were committed to it.
Sure. Can they rebuild a bridge so much so that they give him his entire own cinematic universe, though?
Right.
I don't know about that.
No, I'm not saying necessarily they should have matched this offer, but it's I don't know. It's probably a good move on DC's part, is I guess what I'm getting at, that they managed to take it, not just upgrade from Zack Snyder, by my estimation, but take the talent away from the competition. Can we circle back a bit to the Brave and the Bold, or to Damian Wayne or whatever? Because that's
for sure.
That did strike me as a weird thing, like you were saying, John. But it also strikes me. Okay, there must be a reason why we're looking at down the barrel of a half dozen live action Batman at once, but really only one Superman. And
because the other Superman movie failed.
Well, yes, but these are the two biggest superheroes in the world, and even if it was 6-3, that would still be a 2-1 advantage, which is crazy. But I think there's another angle to that of why we end up with so many Batmen so frequently. I think is just of maybe all superheroes, but certainly all the Justice League superheroes. He is a character that functions so wildly differently in a solo movie or solo book context versus in the cinematic universe in the Justice League context. Batman or Superman, I mean, in Man of Steel or in whatever, his monthly comic book art, isn't a fundamentally different character than he is when he's in Justice League, right? But there is a Gotham City that can kind of function as its own superhero environment, independent of any Green Lanterns or Flashes or Wonder Womans.
Well, I think Batman is, without question, at least for me, the most developed and largest kind of most thought out ecosystem for a superhero to exist in. There's just a lot of variety that exists in there. There's a lot of sort of there's gangster stories have played a big influence on Batman stories. His rogues gallery is sort of famously the best that any superhero has. They can all kind of support their own stories in a way that a lot of others can't. You can do action stories, you can do detective stories, you can do things that are incredibly dark or incredibly light. You can do
you can do kind of horror-ish Seven type stories.
You can lean into his detective background. You can lean into his kung fu fighting. You can lean into his invention. Where does he get those wonderful toys? You can lean into the different aspects of Batman. And although Superman is probably the most well-known, Batman sells more comics than Superman does. If you ask most fans of superheroes or comic books or even DC Comics who's their favorite superhero, it's probably going to be Batman and not Superman, even within the DC universe. Right? It's like Wolverine and Batman, where you're just yeah, they're awesome, right? And that's who people like. So it makes sense to me that there would be more Batman stories than Superman stories, because there are more stories you can tell and a bigger audience for it.
Is it 89 Batman? Is it the Tim Burton, Michael Keaton film that kind of, I don't know, it at least clears the board for a generation and makes him cool for pretty much, every millennial. And millennials going forward are going to love Batman because he's been sort of established in this badass way, this creative kind of unique way that I don't know, it felt so incredibly fresh in '89, and he's been blessed with a couple really good versions since then.
Yeah, I think it's the animated series following that up helps a lot too, even if that's not
Nolan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then they even rolled the animated series into some of the DC animated universe that I'm less familiar with, but the Superman, Batman,
the Justice League cartoon.
There's Justice League. There's Titan. There's like a whole DC cinematic universe that is still currently making films.
Yeah.
Just like the adventures of just everybody is continuing to go, like has been going nonstop since the Batman animated series, which is some of the best Batman stuff out there for sure.
And the animated series is kind of a sacred text to a lot of like cartoon people and DC people, I feel like, and not so much to the broader public that is more familiar with the Burton version or the Nolan version. But I still think even to the broader public, there's a bit of awareness there, and people sort of acknowledge that it's good, even if they're not seen every single episode.
Batman the Animated Series took what I think at least is, we were watching Super Friends when we were 4 and 5, and that was exactly what we needed when we were 4 or 5. And then Batman the Animated Series came out in like 89, 90 when we were 9 or 10, and it was a more mature cartoon, but still clearly a cartoon. And that was what we needed at that time. And that took us through like into our teens or whatever. And then you get the Nolan movies came out, and the Burton movies and the Nolan movies and whatever.
Been blessed. Yeah.
That was what we needed. That was the sequence that we needed at that time to cement those cartoons and Batman specifically into our psyches.
Well, and that rolls all the way into the Matt Reeves version, which is even, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's more mature than the Nolan version, but it's definitely gorier and more violent and more dark and dour.
Yeah, it's what we need in our 40s, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for me, I feel like that Batman the Animated Series, to me, hit the mark right where it needed to for DC Comics. Right? It was noir-y, it was dark enough, but it was still DC Comics of superheroes and good guys doing good things and bad guys doing bad things, and the good guys win. And that, to me, is like, there's the beauty of DC Comics for me, because unlike you, Al, I was only DC, right? I was like, nah, no Marvel. I don't want any of that nonsense. I don't need the angst. I don't need the X-Men. I don't need... Right?
Well, that was my bread and butter as a kid.
Yeah. It's that purity of tone of good versus evil that is passé now, right? But I think the Batman the Animated Series really kept to that while bringing in some darker visual elements to keep us interested and entertained, but still kept to the core vision, which I think since then most versions of any DC hero has not done, which is ultimately what led to their failure.
Yeah, it had the darker visual element, like you said, but still, like, the animated series Penguin, that was a motherfucking penguin, that Mr. Freeze had a goddamn freeze ray. Like, it wasn't sort of reimagining of, oh, here's a gangster with a, weird nose that's been nicknamed Penguin by whatever. Like, he had umbrellas and coattails and a top hat and a goddamn monocle. Like, they went for it. And I guess that's what I'm getting at with Batman, is that he, of all superheroes, most comfortably runs the full gamut from like rated G to PG to rated R, whereas a lot of these other heroes, Superman, for example, functions very well in a PG context, not so comfortably in an R-rated context. And
he sure doesn't, yeah.
But they don't. Okay, so where I'd push back on that is like, he doesn't need to.
No, I'm not saying he does.
Nobody needs an R-rated Superman, right? What we need...
Zack Snyder really wanted it, though.
Right, I know he did. We have plenty of R-rated heroes, right? We have very, very few PG heroes, especially the last couple of decades.
Arguably, all of the Marvel universe is that.
Well, they're all PG-13 because they're snide and they
say shit every once in a while
sometimes, and I guess they don't really have sex in very much, just Iron Man. Even though they're a little bit older, though, a little bit, I guess, older than Well, we're missing
I mean,
the sort of the
it depends who you're talking about, right? If you're talking about Captain America, if you're talking about Spider-Man, yes, you get your PG heroes, and that to me is, again, when I was looking up my stuff about like Superman, it's like there was no Captain America in popular culture really until the Captain America movie came out, right? There were Spider-Man TV shows, there was the Hulk TV show, there was the X-Men animated series. But it wasn't until you got into the Marvel Cinematic Universe that they brought these heroes like Captain America out. And so they could reinvigorate this purely heroic figure without the baggage of 40 years of Superman shows and do with Captain America what anybody should try to do with Superman. Like that moment where Cap is on that hill where his shield is broken, all of Thanos' army at the end of Endgame is coming at him, and there's that one ray of light shining down, and then just before the Cap on your left, right, just before that moment. That is Superman, right? And they did it with Captain America. And I don't think you can do it with Superman now because they did it so well with Captain America that it's so challenging to make a good Superman movie now.
Well, I think the other thing about that, why it's harder to do that moment with Superman is because Superman is so defined by invulnerability. And what that moment's all about is, the shield being broken and him being beat down and overwhelmed, but standing tall. And yeah, you can kind of recreate that with Superman, but it's a lot harder to make Superman feel like an underdog, even when Captain America, obviously, they decide he can go toe to toe with Thanos when they feel like it, but his baseline power level is such that it's not hard to make him feel overwhelmed by some robots in Age of Ultron or whatever. And you have to work a little harder to be like, okay, so Darkseid also has all Superman's powers, whatever, but he's at like a level of 87 when Superman's only a 65 or something. It's all kind of esoteric at those godlike levels.
I mean, I think this gets to the difficulty of Superman, of telling a Superman story, at least in film, as opposed to the comic medium. I mean, we're talking about how Batman's kind of been here and growing with us for the last 30 years or however long. But as you said, Alex, we had, how many, 5 years without a live-action, or without some version of Superman on screen since 77. He's been here with us, too. He's always been here. But those projects have not hit as hard. You know, what is the great Superman story since Christopher Reeve? I don't think there is one. I mean, my favorite is Lois and Clark, and it's because it lined up with my puberty very well. You know, that's about
Smallville?
It. No. I watched like a season of Smallville, and I was like, oh okay, I've got Buffy already. That's fine. But I know there's a generation that did really like Smallville. Fine, but even I wasn't like, come on, it's not the best Superman thing, right?
Yeah, it's the CW. It's not, its best. It's it's the off-brand version of, it's not prestige TV or whatever. It's not getting the full, Game of Thrones treatment.
So what I would say is those CW shows are the success of the DC universe.
Well, okay, so
Flash, Arrow, Supergirl, Smallville, that is where DC Comics, given their quote-unquote simplicity in story, like that's where they've lived, and that's where they've been successful. So why are we taking and trying to create a cinematic universe that is subversive and dark with murderers and blah, 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 when they have actually a calculation that works for them, and they've had that calculation for 25, 30 years now? Make more CW shows.
Okay, so maybe this is
People
me
like
looking
them.
from the outside. But you put Smallville in the same vein as those later, because I think there being like a 10-year gap before they start doing Arrow and then the Flash and the whole CW Arrow.
So the way I look at them, because they are sort of superhero stories couched in tween, early teenager, there's a love triangle, and there's a this, and there's a that, and the powers aren't the main thing. There's a lot of interplay and character and a lot of 13-year-old fantasy stuff about oh, he loves me, and she's, and they're so cute. There's that part of those CW shows that exists. So that's why I put Smallville in the same realm as Flash and Arrow and Supergirl, because of those sort of the interrelationships between the characters, which is what made them CW shows.
They all found their audience too. I mean, I'm sure if Smallville had existed just 6 years later, it would all have been part of that. You know, it would have been part of the same umbrella franchise or whatever. Because Smallville ran like 10 years, like an outrageous number of years for that show. Flash ran like 6 years. Arrow ran a good long time.
Flash is still theoretically in production. 2014 is when it started. Still going. Arrow was 2012 through 2020. Supergirl's 2015 through 21.
Yeah, so like that is successful in its own terms. They're looking for bigger game, though, right? They're looking for MCU style global domination with these movies, and the Batman films, the really big ones, have proved that it can happen. That they could get that. They could get that.
It can happen for Batman,
right?
Yeah,
right. Mm-hmm.
But it has to be possible for Superman too. You know, so we're jumping back because. They said there's been a Superman bumping around every year for our entire lifetimes. But when was the last time that one of the Supermen was widely beloved? Or even intensely
1977.
Beloved? Right. It's like Christopher Reeve.
1980.
Yeah, because Smallville has its adherents, but never crossed over. I mean, even the way the Arrowverse seems to have, I'd say. But maybe that's just a function of the internet being a different place than it was in
but
the
year
Arrowverse
2000 has their own Superman too.
Yeah, exactly. And
Lois and Clark, it was Superman and Lois, a different show.
Yeah,
right. And there was Superman Returns, which nobody liked.
We can talk about this. I may be the only person in the world who liked that movie.
Right. Okay. Demographically speaking, it was not accepted by audiences. And then you have Henry Cavill's, the Man of Steel Superman. I think there's quite a few people out there, of which I would consider myself one of them, who think Henry Cavill is actually quite a good Superman. But there's this niggling problem that it's being written and directed and shepherded by somebody who has an evident dislike for Superman, I think, which always hamstrung that character.
Or what Superman stands for.
Yes.
Which is why I liked Superman Returns. The story was bad, and Brandon Routh, I think, is not particularly interesting to watch. But the idea of that movie is what I think the idea of Superman is, which is an inspiration for all people to do the best they can with what they have and who they are. Right? So that's what I was talking about with that Captain America moment. Captain America was standing up and doing the right thing and the best thing given who he was. And what Superman does, it doesn't matter that he has these powers. What Superman is an inspirational figure so that every single person in the world can act to the best of their ability for the good.
Well,
and so that's what they were trying to do with Superman Returns, and the rest of it didn't work around it. But there are so many moments in that movie where I'm like, I mean, it's heavy-handed, but like in the cigarette, Lois Lane is standing, she's lighting a cigarette up on the roof of the Daily Planet, and Superman's blowing the cigarette out as she's trying to light the cigarette. And then at the end of the movie, she goes to light the cigarette, looks at it, and is like, "No, I'm not going to light the cigarette." Right? And so that was quite heavy-handed, but like that is the idea of Superman for me, of like acting for yourself in the good because of the example that he sets.
Well, this makes me think the Captain America moment. I mean, it's just what the example of how well they have done all of that with Captain America on the Marvel end of things is less that facing off against Thanos moment than the part in Winter Soldier, which is not as good of an image, but story-wise, where he's given the speech to the, I guess, like SHIELD loyalists as the Hydra people are taken over, and the guy with a gun to his head still like refuses to go along with the bad guys and says, sorry, it's Captain's orders. And that's the role that Superman should be playing within the DC universe.
Right. And if you're making a Snyderverse Superman, you are like by definition not doing that.
Right.
And which is why 1977 Superman works and why 1980 Superman works, because it's that story. And if you can do that story today, and I hope you could, but that's what makes Superman work. Because you're right, he does have a billion powers, and so like what threat is there really? It's that inspirational figure. Like some of the best Superman comics don't have Superman in them at all. Like it's like it's everyday, it's story of everyday people in the DC universe living in Metropolis. You see a streak of Superman flying over them, but then it's a story about this person who is inspired by Superman to do this good thing.
It does feel like a lot. Some of the more iconic, I don't know, comic panels, things that I've absorbed Superman over the years have been cameo type appearances like that, as opposed to full blown Superman story arcs within his own title.
For me personally, the ones that stick with me are like the covers of the Jimmy Olsen issues where Superman is doing something goofy and malevolent to him, like forcing him to marry a gorilla, or
yeah, well,
but there's an elasticity to him. Yeah, I think that this is all well said, and Captain America does show that it can be done. Captain America has one advantage, though, which is that he has disadvantages. That he's vulnerable. That he's like, no, I'm just a guy from Brooklyn. That he can do that. Superman cannot do that. He is an all-powerful alien who can do anything. And I mean, just in practical terms, I think that creates a difficulty in writing.
And
yeah.
So he is an alien, and maybe this is what they're going for when they say like having him balance his Kryptonian heritage and his growing up in Kansas, but like he is the most human, but he's an alien and he has billions of superpowers, right? He is what is best in humanity. He is what is good in all of us.
You can see them trying and failing to do that with Snyder, with the two fathers thing, with the Russell Crowe father and Kevin Costner father, and they botched Pa Kent so hard in those that it works in the opposite way. Yeah.
So let me tell you a story about why I think they cannot make a good Superman movie, despite how much I want them to. Mm-hmm. So I'm a teacher, and I teach a theater class, and I have them watch Into the Woods, which is a musical that tracks a bunch of the fairy tales. And we watch the first act, and at the end of the first act is the happily ever after. Right? It's all the traditional fairy tales. And I have them write a little paper about it. And this one kid wrote in a paper, it was interesting to see a story that didn't have a typical fairy tale ending, such as the big bad wolf isn't as bad as they seem, or sometimes a prince isn't what you're looking for. So, like, this next generation of children think that is what a typical fairy tale ending is. They think Shrek in Wicked and all of these stories that subvert what, like, traditional fairy tales are of, like, the princess gets rescued by the prince and there's good and there's evil. Like, there's a generation of younger people who do not know that what the initial endings were in order to be have the twist of Shrek. They don't know that original one exists. And so if you don't know that original quote unquote purer ending exists, like, I don't think you can make a good Superman movie because your audience doesn't know that they're looking for just a happy ending.
They don't know it's being subverted. Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I thought that
blew my mind when I read that paper. Blew my mind.
Yeah. That there is now a generation of kids who think that having a princess like actually just be a damsel that is saved by the prince is doing something subversive and deconstructive.
Like Frozen, Shrek, Wicked. They think those are fairy tales.
No, Well, and the Snyderverse. Yes. But that's the thing is that he really wanted to do the take on Superman from The Dark Knight Returns, that he just started out there without any regard for the fact that Dark Knight Returns only makes sense because it's set 20 years after, like, the entire DC universe has run its course, like the Prime one. And it was just a weird, uncomfortable situation for that character because of that. That's how I always felt about it.
Yeah. I mean, you think there'd be room for that subversive take, but at this point, it's not subversive anymore. It's just it's just what it's been for the last 20 years. Yeah,
which is why, like, Authority. When I see a story like Authority, I'm like, why? We have that story many times over.
I mean, there's always room for execution, though, because I said the same thing about Peacemaker. It's like, well, like, they already had Deadpool, so what do we need Peacemaker for? Like, and plus there's stuff like Titans or whatever running around, so just using the F word in a cape is like, what charge do we get out of this anymore? but I think it's interesting where you're putting it is it runs so much deeper than that. That there is no expectation that superheroes be good and upright.
Correct.
At a very baseline level. So what are you subverting with the authority? Right. It's just like, well, yeah,
yeah.
Of
it's
course.
a Watchmen thing. Okay, yeah.
Right. So if they could,
of course, all superheroes are bastards.
If they could pull off though a truly good Superman story, but they're not trying. They're not trying to create a purely good Superman because I think that they think that won't sell. But there hasn't been that story other than Captain America's, right? There hasn't been that story in so long. When is the last time there was just a good guy, bad guy, either superhero or action or whatever movie?
Well, I think other than Captain America, I think Spider-Man hits those notes a lot. Maybe more so the Raimi version than the Tom Holland version. But I don't know, the Tom Holland version at its best, I think, still hits some of those notes.
The Garfield ones notably do not, though. That's a thing they're kind of trying to do too. They're trying to do subversive Spider-Man a little bit there, and it's just such an ill fit for that character that it doesn't work at all. Yeah.
Even the Holland version is so sort of nestled into, I guess, snark as the baseline of the Marvel universe to a degree.
He's Tony Stark's kid in that, basically. He's the progeny of Stark, and that actually is kind of works surprisingly well. But it does rob the character of an ineffable thing that is there in the Tobey Maguire performance of all things. Yeah. The other thing to get around with Superman is he's too strong.
Yeah, we always come back to that.
To me, that's a matter of a framing device. That's not a problem. You give him Mr. Mixelplick or Mixelpill.
Oh, please,
or however you pronounce that word.
I'd love that.
Right?
That'd be great. Yeah.
And then
Mixoplick.
Then it doesn't matter. His power doesn't matter. There are beings that are more powerful or more subversive, or why Lex Luthor works. He's just smarter.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so
Luthor. Oh, God, I want to talk about... I love Lex Luthor so much, and he's been done so badly so many times. Like, they just can't get it together with Lex Luthor. He is a perfect contrast to Superman. He's my favorite super villain. He's philosophically the argument with Superman. And in the movies, he's just like he's a real estate schemer so goddamn often, and it's just like, what is this stupid shit? This is why I don't like the Reeve films very much. Is I hate the Hackman Luthor, which is weird. I know people like him, but I think he's very boring and very dumb. And then Superman Returns.
He was the right Lex Luthor for that Superman.
I guess. I guess. I don't know. Justice League cartoon is the only Luthor I think really got close to it. The Clancy Brown version, that's really good. They had a real chance with the Snyder one, but man, did they botch it.
I still kind of like the idea of Tech Bro.
It's not a bad idea, but they botched
Luthor,
it.
But
yeah,
Ugh. Yeah. No, they didn't hit the target. But I'm like, you're close to something there.
My favorite era of Lex Luthor is he was president.
That's so cool. Yeah.
In around, I think it was like the 2000 election, they like ran like a pretend election, and like Lex Luthor became president of the United States. And so like that era of Lex Luthor representing the American ideal at the same time as Superman, like representing the American ideal, I thought there was some interesting interplay at that point in time between Lex Luthor and Superman.
And you would think that would be something Snyder. You would think Snyder would have insight into that he could do some sort of Randian philosophy thing with Luthor that would make sense and make him compelling. And no, not at all. Not at all. Granny's peach tea. That's what we got. Man, I hate that performance. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that, even with that, it's getting harder to do that now. I mean, honestly, both the Tech Bro version and the President version is that as time has gone on, especially the last, let's call it 7 years or so, it's become pretty obvious that you don't need a super villain's intellect to be a tech billionaire or to be the president.
Or a supervillain.
Yeah. And so I think it becomes a little harder to do that. I mean, like, to do a tech bro whatever without drawing direct comparisons to Elon Musk, like or whatever. And
he'll be the next Bond villain, I'm sure. But like, I think you could do a Lex Luthor that is fashioned after Elon Musk, and the twist is he's quite intelligent. You know, that's what makes him formidable. That seems obvious. It seems like a natural thing to do. It seems like what they were trying to do in Dawn of Justice.
Yes, it was what they were trying to go for there.
Mm-hmm. But you know, it should be there. It should exist, and I like the Luthor that you can kind of get with a little bit, like that he is kind of just like, no, I've done this myself. I was not given powers. I think that's an interesting angle to take with him, and especially if you have a really upright, really fundamentally good Superman to play him against. Is that yes, he you know, in many ways he is the American ideal in all of its contradictions and viciousness as well. Like they are really good 1-2. You know,
there are two halves of this of the whole of the American identity, I suppose. The sort of brutal capitalist manifest destiny almost, but also sort of self-made entrepreneurial thing, and versus a more humble but and I don't know, compassionate but also sort of privileged, I suppose, element to it. Like I don't know.
Do you guys know about the truth, justice, and the American way thing?
I mean, I know it's Superman's sort of it's his whole deal, and they don't really know how to say that in movies anymore.
Well, that it was like was it invented in the 50s as an anti-communist, sort of sop to HUAC or whatever?
Truth and Justice came during World War II, and then they added the American way in the 1950s as an anti-communist message. At the same time, they put.
Is there a whole period where with Superman fighting the Reds? Is that a thing in comic history? There must be.
I know he fought the Klan at one point.
That's cool.
Like pretty early on, in like the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, but like on the like pre-TV, like radio serial era, it was when at a time when the Klan was not universally recognized as a national villain. Superman, I mean, at least the accounting I have read about it, the Superman radio serial casting them in that role went a long way towards the country at large accepting that they were the pinnacle of American evil.
I really do love the the sort of historical context of Superman, where you can kind of see it as a Jewish diaspora story. I think that's so fascinating. I don't know, that Michael Chabon book is really good. It's when you kind of peek into him and look at the history and look at the things that he has done and the way the stories have been told for 100 years or so now. There really is meat on the bone that could be taken and used. It's just tough. It's just tough to see. I don't know. Maybe trying to make it the most successful thing in the world, trying to make the Dark Knight the version that is incredibly profitable is maybe not the way to go. Maybe it's counterintuitive even. That maybe you can be happy with a film that makes only $1 billion instead of $2 billion. That doesn't
tells
have
a story
to be
true to Superman,
yes,
and will be seen as a good Superman story instead of a bad movie.
Yeah,
and Superman.
And you can maybe you do a couple like good ones of that, even maybe just one really good one with that doesn't have to make all the money in the world. Your Batman Begins, if you will, and then that opens the door to be the most successful thing. If it's a take that people really like and fall in love with, be it like maybe they fall in love with it on streaming after it leaves the theaters. But the point is that it's good and embraced. And that's hard to do, obviously, but that should be the goal. And I'm sure that is the goal for James Gunn here. In some,
it's a sounds good thing you could maybe do if you had movie studios run by Ma Kent, but I think they're run by Lex Luthor types.
Yeah, for sure.
They're not going to settle for $1 billion.
Of course not.
So since you brought the origins of Superman up, John, I just want to... There's this idea I've been having that I wanted to put out there in the universe and see what people say.
Yeah.
The original golden age of superheroes arose in the 1930s. And because I've been thinking about masks lately, like why all these masked superheroes? And I was like, I wonder if as children in the 1918 plague, children wearing masks were afraid of masks or whatever, or got into their psyche. And then as they became 20 and 30-year-olds creating these comic books, they took the idea of masks, which was in their head, and they brought it out into the world, and they created heroes wearing masks from their like childhood memories of masks being on people during this time of death and plague and stuff. And I wonder if we're going to have in the next 15 years a resurgence of a good masked superhero, like new ones, new stories, new characters that are going to come from young people who lived through this COVID age in masks, bringing out these good heroic characters that could solve the problem of, like COVID. And I wonder if we're going to go into a new golden age of superheroes in 10 or 15 years as these kids' psyches churn out new ideas of masks and heroes. And I just like,
well, we talking
there's
like
a part of me that really wants that to happen, but it's just an idea.
Well, it could be a thing of secret identities are now passé. Like that's a gone thing, kind of in superheroes. I mean, I guess there's some still, but I think there's some drama still to be wrung over. Like I guess the last Spider-Man was all about like, do people know who Peter Parker is or not? But for the most part, that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, he's the only Marvel superhero that had a secret identity.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of sets the tone right away with, I am Iron Man, and I don't know, it's sort of, well, it's an avenue they did not pursue in the Snyderverse, at least, not really. Well, it doesn't matter that Bruce Wayne's Batman. We don't really even know who Bruce Wayne is other than Batman. I guess it was in Nolan, but not, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a story as old as Zorro or whatever. Like the person who disguises his identity to fight for the greater good.
But even Zorro was early 20th century.
Masks go back far. Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back to you got the Scarlet Pimpernel or whatever, and the Robin Hood. Even that the idea that the Hood was hiding his identity. That, as I understand it, anyway. But yeah, it does seem like masks used to be a big part of it. They're not necessarily a part. I mean, Superman, obviously, that's not, weirdly, Superman, one of the people with a secret identity, but no mask.
He wears the mask when he's a person. He wears the glasses. I mean, it's the Kill Bill monologue that I think ruined Superman for everyone for a little while, at least.
The glasses are the mask, I suppose. Okay, that's fair enough. But so masks, capes, secret identities are all indicators of superhero-ness, but you don't have to have any one of them to go, to be the thing.
I am curious if, like, 15 years from now, if anyone has any patience for superheroes. Or I mean, like you look at this, like Ant-Man, Quantumania, one of the lowest-grossing Marvel films in a while. Shazam just face-planted, just destroyed, losing hundreds of millions of dollars. It's and we have a flotilla of titles coming for the rest of the 2020s. Like we're not going to be rid of these for a while. Is it possible that people still want to go to superhero films in 2029 when we're getting to the end of phase one of the DC slate that I didn't even mention as we were going through them because we got distracted? There's a Booster Gold TV show, a Supergirl movie, and a Swamp Thing movie also coming out. What chance do these things have to really still succeed? Like for real? Like
I'd say Swamp Thing has a chance to not feel like a superhero movie.
I'm sure they're just holding that out, and like
they're trying to make a horror movie, which they should.
Like, would you like to do this, Del Toro? Do you want to come make this movie, Guillermo del Toro? I'm sure they're just holding out hope for that on that one. But okay.
Let me say this: I am the biggest DC fan you'll ever meet. I've only read DC comics since I was a child, and I have no desire to see a DC movie. Or haven't up until this point.
Damn.
Just like, I just don't care. I just don't care. Especially the Snyderverse. Maybe I'll give the Gunverse a try, but like, they have not told a story that I'm interested in so long that I'm like, whatever.
So, but comparatively, were you big on the animation or on the Arrowverse?
Not the Arrowverse because I was a grown-up by then. And... But Smallville, I watched.
They have grown-up fans, probably. I don't.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I watched every episode of Smallville, even into my early 20s. I watched Obviously, I watched the Batman cartoon show, the Superman cartoon show. There's a Justice League cartoon show. Not the Teen Titans, but the Young Justice cartoon show is excellent. But the movies, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, indies.
Does that apply to just DC proper, or are you not? Are you against the Nolan movies as well?
I don't love them as much as you guys do. Mm-hmm. Having listened to your episodes and know that most people think that they are genius. I mean, certainly the third one, I have zero time or energy for.
That's the worst one by far.
Right.
Yes,
But like the second one, the Heath Ledger Joker, I don't think is a work of genius in the same way that everybody else in the universe does. And I tend to have opinions that are different than most people in the universe. And so it's a good movie, but I don't think it's like the pinnacle.
I think it's
it's pretty rough, tough to beat. But I understand. Like, look, there's been also over the years around that one specifically been so much hyperbole that I understand being a little wary of it. And I also understand. I think it's fine. It's one of the good things about the Nolan movies is that it's an approach that is not for everyone. It is for as world conquering as they were and popular as they became. Those are very idiosyncratic to this one. Kind of tweedy, rather sexless British man. And I don't know. I think when they're good, they're great. But the Snyderverse drained a lot of my enthusiasm, such as it was, for DC stuff. And yeah, there's just the fatigue now that we keep circling around. That I mean, you asked earlier, John, if people are really going to have any time for superhero movies in 2029. I kind of think the answer to that is no. But
not
the appetite could have returned by 2032, like as early as
if they stop. If they stop, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there'll have to be a crash and burn,
right?
Yeah,
but then there's one good one, and it turns things around. I
guess I have no desire to ever see a superhero movie in the movie theater. I don't see the point of that anymore. Like, I've watched all the Disney stuff or the Marvel stuff that's come out, but I waited for it to come on Disney Plus. Like, I'm not going to go to the theater to pursue Quantumania.
Well, I mean, it is interesting that like you can wait 45 days and watch it at home now for free, so that makes it even less purpose to go to see Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania in theaters. It's it's almost a self-defeating business practice. I think we'll see how
get as much money as you can now, and then just stop making them when they're done.
Yeah.
No, but they're never done. Nothing ever ends, Adrian.
All right, that's a pretty good place to end it, I think. I don't know. We could talk about this for a while, I feel, but clearly there'll be many, many opportunities to do so again. Because we're in these deep for now, and I don't know, when's the next one? Guardians of the Galaxy about coming right up. So
Flash is coming soon, right?
Flash right after. That's just this year. Blue Beetle's in there at some point.
I got to go get a little girl who's got up for a nap.
All right. Well, then we'll call it an end. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. See ya.